Emotional intelligence, understanding feelings. Welcome to one of the most transformative areas of psychology, emotional intelligence. For decades, we believed that cognitive intelligence, the ability to think logically and solve problems, was the primary predictor of success in life. However, groundbreaking research has revealed that our ability to understand, manage, and effectively use emotions may be even more important for happiness, relationships, and achievement. Emotional intelligence, often abbreviated as EQ, represents a fundamental shift in how we think about human capability. It's not enough to be smart in the traditional sense. We must also be emotionally smart. This means understanding our own emotions, managing them effectively, recognizing emotions in others, and using emotional information to guide our thinking and behavior. What makes emotional intelligence so compelling is that, unlike IQ, which remains relatively fixed throughout life, EQ can be developed and improved at any age. The skills we'll explore today aren't just theoretical concepts. They're practical abilities that can enhance every aspect of your life, from personal relationships and parenting to leadership and career success. The journey into emotional intelligence takes us through fascinating territory: how emotions work in the brain, why some people seem naturally more emotionally skilled than others, and how we can all become more emotionally intelligent. We'll explore the building blocks of emotional intelligence and discover how emotions, rather than being obstacles to rational thinking, can actually enhance our decision-making and social effectiveness. First component: self-awareness. Self-awareness forms the foundation of emotional intelligence. It's the ability to recognize and understand your own emotions as they occur, including their causes, triggers, and effects on your thoughts and behavior. Without self-awareness, emotional intelligence becomes impossible. You can't manage what you don't recognize. Self-awareness operates on multiple levels. At the most basic level, it involves emotional awareness, simply noticing when you're feeling something and being able to name the emotion. Many people go through their days experiencing emotions, but not consciously recognizing them until they become overwhelming. Deeper self-awareness includes understanding your emotional patterns and triggers. You might notice that you become anxious in certain social situations, irritated when you're hungry, or sad when you're overtired. This pattern recognition helps you predict and prepare for emotional responses. Self-awareness also involves understanding the connection between your emotions and your values, goals, and motivations. When you feel frustrated at work, self-awareness helps you recognize whether the frustration stems from being undervalued, overwhelmed, misaligned with your values, or simply having a bad day. The most sophisticated level of self-awareness includes understanding how your emotions affect others. You recognize that your mood influences those around you, that your emotional expressions send messages, and that your emotional state impacts your decision-making quality. Developing self-awareness requires practices like mindfulness, regular self-reflection, and honest self-assessment. Keeping an emotion journal can help you track patterns and triggers. Asking trusted friends or colleagues for feedback can reveal blind spots in your self-understanding. Technology now offers new tools for building self-awareness. Mood tracking apps, biometric monitors, and even AI-powered emotional analysis can provide objective data about your emotional patterns. However, these tools work best when combined with traditional introspection and reflection. Self-awareness isn't about being perfect or never having negative emotions. Instead, it's about being honest and realistic about your emotional experience. This includes acknowledging difficult emotions like anger, jealousy, or fear without judgment, while also recognizing positive emotions and their sources. Cultural factors significantly influence emotional self-awareness. Some cultures encourage emotional expression and discussion, while others emphasize emotional restraint. Understanding your cultural background helps you recognize which emotions you've been taught to notice or ignore. The benefits of increased self-awareness extend far beyond emotional intelligence. Self-aware people make better decisions because they understand how emotions influence their judgment. They have more authentic relationships because they're honest about their feelings. They experience less stress because they can identify and address emotional issues before they escalate. Second component, self-regulation. Self-regulation is the ability to manage your emotions effectively once you're aware of them. It doesn't mean suppressing or ignoring emotions, but rather responding to them in ways that are appropriate, constructive, and aligned with your values and goals. Effective self-regulation involves several key skills. Emotional flexibility means being able to adapt your emotional responses to different situations. What's appropriate in one context might be completely wrong in another. The ability to calibrate your emotional expressions to the situation demonstrates sophisticated self-regulation. Impulse control is another crucial aspect of self-regulation. This means pausing between feeling an emotion and acting on it, giving yourself time to consider the best response. People with good impulse control don't eliminate emotional impulses. They choose which ones to act on and how to express them constructively. Stress management falls under self-regulation as well. This includes both preventing unnecessary stress through good planning and boundaries, and managing unavoidable stress through healthy coping strategies. Effective stress management prevents emotions from becoming overwhelming and impairing judgment. Self-regulation also involves optimism and resilience, the ability to bounce back from setbacks and maintain hope in difficult situations. This doesn't mean being unrealistically positive, but rather maintaining perspective and focusing on what you can control. The neuroscience of self-regulation involves the prefrontal cortex overriding more primitive emotional responses from the limbic system. This neural circuit can be strengthened through practice, much like a muscle. Meditation, mindfulness, and cognitive behavioral techniques all help develop better self-regulation skills. However, self-regulation isn't about becoming emotionally numb or controlled. Healthy self-regulation allows for authentic emotional expression while preventing emotions from becoming destructive or counterproductive. It's about emotional wisdom rather than emotional suppression. Self-regulation strategies vary widely among individuals. Some people benefit from cognitive techniques like reframing negative thoughts or challenging catastrophic assumptions. Others find physical approaches like exercise, breathing techniques, or progressive muscle relaxation more effective. Environmental modifications can support self-regulation. This might involve removing temptations, creating reminders of your values and goals, or structuring your environment to make good choices easier. Understanding your personal triggers and vulnerabilities allows you to proactively manage challenging situations. The development of self-regulation skills often requires patience and self-compassion. People learning these skills frequently struggle with perfectionism, becoming frustrated when they don't immediately master emotional control. Recognizing that self-regulation is a lifelong learning process helps maintain motivation during difficult periods. Third component, motivation. In the context of emotional intelligence, motivation refers specifically to intrinsic motivation, being driven by internal satisfaction rather than external rewards or pressures. This type of motivation is characterized by optimism, commitment to goals, and initiative in pursuing objectives that align with your values. Intrinsically motivated people are energized by the work itself, the opportunity to grow and learn, and the satisfaction of making meaningful contributions. They persist through challenges not because they have to, but because they want to. This creates sustainable motivation that doesn't depend on constant external reinforcement. Achievement motivation is a key component of emotional intelligence. This involves setting challenging but realistic goals, persisting despite obstacles, and maintaining effort even when immediate rewards aren't apparent. Achievement-motivated people are more likely to succeed in long-term endeavors because they can delay gratification and work toward distant goals. Optimism plays a crucial role in emotional intelligence motivation. This isn't blind positivity, but rather realistic optimism, the ability to see setbacks as temporary and specific rather than permanent and pervasive. Optimistic people are more likely to persist after failures and to see opportunities where others see only obstacles. Initiative and proactivity distinguish emotionally intelligent motivation from passive compliance. Motivated people don't wait for permission or perfect conditions. They identify what needs to be done and take action. They create opportunities rather than just responding to them. The flow state, identified by psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, represents optimal motivation in action. When people are intrinsically motivated and engaged in appropriately challenging activities, they enter flow states characterized by complete absorption, effortless concentration, and intrinsic satisfaction. Understanding your personal motivation patterns is crucial for emotional intelligence. What activities energize you? What values drive your behavior? When do you feel most engaged and alive? These insights help you structure your life and work in ways that naturally sustain motivation. Motivation in emotional intelligence also involves the ability to motivate others. Leaders with high emotional intelligence understand what drives different people and can create environments where others find intrinsic satisfaction. They align individual motivations with organizational goals. However, motivation patterns can change over time due to life experiences, developmental stages, and changing circumstances. What motivated you in your 20s might not motivate you in your 40s. Emotional intelligence includes regularly reassessing and adjusting your goals and priorities. Burnout represents a breakdown in motivation systems, often occurring when people pursue extrinsic rewards while neglecting intrinsic satisfaction. Understanding the difference between external and internal motivation helps prevent burnout and maintain sustainable engagement over time. Fourth component, empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. It's what allows us to connect emotionally with other people, to see situations from their perspectives, and to respond appropriately to their emotional needs. Empathy forms the bridge between self-focused emotional intelligence and social emotional intelligence. Cognitive empathy involves understanding what others are thinking and feeling without necessarily sharing those emotions yourself. It's the intellectual recognition of another person's emotional state. This type of empathy allows you to predict how others might react and to tailor your communication accordingly. Emotional empathy goes deeper, involving actually feeling something similar to what others are experiencing. When you see someone in pain and feel distressed yourself, you're experiencing emotional empathy. This creates stronger motivation to help but can also lead to emotional overwhelm if not managed properly. Compassionate empathy combines understanding and feeling with appropriate action. It involves recognizing others' emotions, being moved by them, and then taking helpful action. This is often considered the most mature and useful form of empathy because it leads to effective helping behavior. The development of empathy begins in infancy through mirror neurons and caregiver interactions, but it can be enhanced throughout life. Reading fiction, traveling, and deliberately exposing yourself to diverse perspectives all help develop empathetic abilities. Active listening and perspective-taking exercises also strengthen empathetic skills. However, empathy has potential downsides when not properly regulated. Empathetic people can become overwhelmed by others' emotions, leading to burnout and emotional exhaustion. They might also be manipulated by those who exploit their empathetic responses for personal gain. Cultural differences significantly affect empathy expression and interpretation. Some cultures encourage open emotional expression and empathetic responding, while others value emotional restraint and independence. Understanding these differences prevents misinterpretation of empathetic signals across cultural boundaries. Empathy in leadership creates more effective teams and organizations. Leaders who understand their team members' emotional needs, motivations, and concerns can create more supportive environments and make better decisions about personnel and strategy. However, leaders must balance empathy with necessary business decisions. Technology presents both opportunities and challenges for empathy development. Video calls and social media can help us connect with people across distances, but they can also reduce the quality of empathetic connections compared to face-to-face interaction. Digital communication often lacks the subtle emotional cues that facilitate empathy. The measurement of empathy involves both self-report questionnaires and behavioral observations. However, people often overestimate their empathetic abilities, making objective assessment challenging. Getting feedback from others about your empathetic responses provides more accurate information about your empathetic effectiveness. Fifth component, social skills. Social skills represent the practical application of emotional intelligence in interpersonal interactions. They involve using emotional information to guide communication, build relationships, resolve conflicts, and influence others in positive ways. Social skills transform emotional awareness into effective social functioning. Communication skills form the foundation of emotional intelligence in social contexts. This includes not just speaking clearly, but also listening actively, reading nonverbal cues, and adapting your communication style to different audiences and situations. Emotionally intelligent communicators can sense how their message is being received and adjust accordingly. Relationship building involves creating genuine connections with others based on mutual understanding and respect. This requires vulnerability, authenticity, and the ability to find common ground while respecting differences. Strong relationships provide the foundation for all other social skills. Conflict resolution represents one of the most challenging applications of social skills. It requires managing your own emotions while helping others manage theirs, finding win-win solutions, and maintaining relationships even through disagreements. Effective conflict resolution often strengthens relationships rather than damaging them. Influence and persuasion skills allow emotionally intelligent people to guide others toward positive outcomes without manipulation or coercion. This involves understanding others' motivations, presenting ideas in compelling ways, and building consensus around shared goals. Teamwork and collaboration require coordinating emotions and efforts among multiple people. This includes understanding group dynamics, managing different personality types, and creating psychological safety where everyone can contribute effectively. Teams with emotionally intelligent members typically outperform those without. Leadership represents the highest expression of social skills in emotional intelligence. Emotionally intelligent leaders inspire others, create positive organizational cultures, and navigate complex interpersonal dynamics while achieving goals. They model emotional intelligence and help others develop these skills. Networking and relationship management extends social skills beyond immediate work or personal relationships. This involves maintaining connections over time, providing value to others, and building mutually beneficial professional relationships. Effective networking is based on genuine interest in others rather than purely transactional exchanges. Social awareness involves reading the emotional climate of groups and organizations. This includes understanding unspoken tensions, recognizing power dynamics, and sensing when change is needed. Socially aware people can navigate complex social environments more effectively. Cultural competence is increasingly important in our globalized world. This involves understanding how emotional expression and social interaction vary across cultures, and adapting your approach accordingly. What seems emotionally intelligent in one culture might be inappropriate in another. The development of social skills requires practice in real-world situations. Role-playing, feedback from others, and deliberate practice of specific skills all contribute to improvement. However, social skills must be grounded in genuine emotional intelligence. Techniques without authentic emotion recognition and regulation often come across as manipulative. Sixth component: emotional contagion. Emotional contagion is the phenomenon where emotions spread from one person to another, often unconsciously. Just as physical contagion spreads disease, emotional contagion spreads feelings, moods, and emotional states through social interactions. Understanding this process is crucial for managing your emotional environment and influence. The mechanism of emotional contagion involves mirror neurons, facial mimicry, and physiological synchronization. When we see someone smile, our facial muscles unconsciously mirror that expression, which then triggers similar emotions in ourselves. This happens so quickly and automatically that we're often unaware of the process. Emotional contagion operates at both conscious and unconscious levels. Conscious emotional contagion occurs when we deliberately try to match someone else's emotional state, such as getting excited about a friend's good news. Unconscious emotional contagion happens automatically through proximity and observation. The strength of emotional contagion depends on several factors. Close relationships, physical proximity, eye contact, and emotional expressiveness all increase contagion effects. Some people are more susceptible to emotional contagion, while others are more likely to be emotional carriers who spread their emotions to others. Positive emotional contagion can create upward spirals in relationships and groups. When one person expresses genuine enthusiasm, gratitude, or joy, others often catch these emotions, creating collectively positive experiences. This explains why optimistic people tend to be popular and why positive work cultures are more productive. However, negative emotional contagion can be equally powerful and more problematic. Anxiety, anger, and depression can spread through families, teams, and organizations, creating toxic emotional environments. One person's bad mood can drag down an entire group if not managed properly. Understanding emotional contagion helps explain why emotional intelligence includes managing not just your own emotions, but also being aware of your emotional impact on others. Emotionally intelligent people recognize when they're catching others' emotions and when others are catching theirs. Strategies for managing emotional contagion include creating emotional boundaries, practicing emotional regulation, and consciously choosing your emotional environment. If you're susceptible to negative emotional contagion, you might need to limit exposure to consistently negative people or develop stronger emotional immunity. Emotional contagion has significant implications for leadership and teamwork. Leaders' emotional states spread throughout their organizations, making emotional self-regulation a crucial leadership skill. Teams with emotionally positive members tend to be more creative, collaborative, and effective. Social media and digital communication create new forms of emotional contagion. Emotions can spread through online networks, sometimes faster and more broadly than through face-to-face interaction. Understanding digital emotional contagion helps explain phenomena like viral content and online mob behavior. The therapeutic applications of emotional contagion include using positive emotional states to help others feel better. Therapists, coaches, and helpers often use their own regulated emotional states to create safe, positive environments for others. However, this requires strong emotional boundaries to prevent burnout. Seventh component: mood effects. Mood effects refer to how our current emotional state influences our thinking, perception, memory, and decision-making. Unlike specific emotions, which are usually responses to particular events, moods are more general emotional states that can persist for hours or days and color our entire experience. Research has demonstrated that moods have profound effects on cognitive processing. When we're in positive moods, We tend to think more creatively, see opportunities rather than threats, and make more optimistic judgments. Positive moods broaden our attention and make us more open to new experiences and ideas. Negative moods, while often uncomfortable, serve important functions. They narrow our attention to focus on problems and threats, promote more careful and systematic thinking, and can lead to more accurate judgments in some situations. However, chronic negative moods can impair performance and well-being. Mood-congruent memory demonstrates how our current mood affects what we remember. When we're happy, we more easily recall positive memories. When we're sad, negative memories become more accessible. This creates feedback loops where moods can reinforce themselves through selective memory activation. The effect infusion model explains how moods influence our judgments and decisions. When we're making complex decisions or evaluating ambiguous situations, our current mood provides emotional information that gets incorporated into our thinking process. This can lead to mood-biased decisions that we later regret. Mood effects on social perception are particularly important for emotional intelligence. Our current mood affects how we interpret others' emotions, intentions, and behaviors. When we're in a bad mood, we're more likely to interpret neutral expressions as negative and to assume hostile intent in ambiguous situations. Understanding mood effects helps explain why timing matters so much in important conversations and decisions. Having difficult discussions when everyone is in a positive mood often leads to better outcomes than having them during stressful or negative periods. Weather, sleep, exercise, diet, and social interactions all influence our moods, often in predictable ways. Emotionally intelligent people learn to recognize these patterns and can take proactive steps to manage their mood states. This might involve exercise before important meetings or scheduling challenging conversations for times when they typically feel most positive. Mood regulation strategies include both changing your mood and working with your current mood effectively. Sometimes it's better to address a problem while in a detail-focused negative mood, while other times it's worth improving your mood first to access more creative and optimistic thinking. The spillover effect describes how moods carry over from one situation to another. A bad morning commute can affect your entire workday unless you consciously reset your emotional state. Learning to create emotional transitions between different life domains helps prevent negative spillover effects. Organizational mood climate refers to the collective mood of groups and organizations. Just as individuals have moods, groups develop emotional atmospheres that affect everyone's experience and performance. Leaders play crucial roles in shaping and managing organizational mood through their own emotional states and the environments they create. Eighth component, James Lange theory of emotion. The James Lange theory, proposed independently by William James and Carl Lange in the late 1800s, suggests that emotions result from our interpretation of physiological changes in our body. According to this theory, we don't run because we're afraid. We feel afraid because we're running. This counterintuitive idea has profound implications for emotional intelligence. The theory proposes that emotional experiences follow a specific sequence. First, we encounter a stimulus. Second, our body responds with physiological changes. Third, we interpret these bodily changes. And finally, we experience the emotion. This means that emotions are essentially our brain's interpretation of what's happening in our body. Modern research has found partial support for the James Lange theory. Studies show that manipulating physiological states can indeed influence emotions. People who hold a pen in their teeth, forcing their facial muscles into a smile-like position, report feeling happier than those who hold the pen with their lips, creating a frown-like expression. The theory helps explain why physical interventions can be effective for emotional regulation. Deep breathing exercises work partly because they activate the parasympathetic nervous system, creating physiological calm that the brain interprets as emotional calm. Exercise can improve mood by creating physiological changes associated with positive emotions. Understanding the James Lange theory enhances emotional intelligence by highlighting the connection between body and mind. When you notice physical tension, rapid heartbeat, or shallow breathing, these might be early warning signs of emotional states before you're consciously aware of feeling anything specific. The theory also suggests that changing your physical state can change your emotional state. Standing in confident postures can make you feel more confident. Slowing your breathing can reduce anxiety. Relaxing your facial muscles can decrease feelings of anger or frustration. However, the James Lange theory has limitations. Not all emotions have distinct physiological signatures, and cognitive factors play important roles in emotional experience that the theory doesn't fully address. Fear and excitement, for example, can have very similar physiological profiles, but very different subjective experiences. The facial feedback hypothesis, related to the James Lange theory, suggests that facial expressions influence emotional experience. When we smile, even artificially, we tend to feel happier. When we frown, we tend to feel more negative. This has implications for emotional regulation and social interaction. Body language and posture also influence emotional states according to James Lange principles. Research on power posing suggests that standing in confident positions for just 2 minutes can increase confidence-related hormones and improve performance in challenging situations. The therapeutic applications of James Lange theory include body-based interventions for emotional problems. Techniques like progressive muscle relaxation, yoga, and breathing exercises work partly by changing physiological states that then influence emotional experiences. This provides multiple pathways for emotional regulation beyond purely cognitive approaches. Ninth component: cognitive theory of emotions. The cognitive theory of emotions, developed by researchers like Richard Lazarus and Stanley Schachter, proposes that emotions result from our cognitive interpretation and evaluation of situations, not just from physiological responses. This theory emphasizes that the same situation can produce different emotions depending on how we think about and interpret what's happening. Cognitive appraisal theory suggests that we constantly evaluate events along dimensions like personal relevance, goal congruence, and coping potential. These appraisals determine which emotions we experience and how intensely we feel them. A job interview might create excitement if appraised as an opportunity, or anxiety if appraised as a threat. The two-factor theory of emotion combines physiological arousal with cognitive interpretation. According to this theory, we need both bodily arousal and a cognitive label to experience specific emotions. The same physiological arousal might be interpreted as fear in a dark alley or excitement at a concert, depending on the context and our cognitive appraisal. Primary appraisal involves evaluating whether a situation is relevant to our goals and well-being. If something doesn't matter to us, we won't have strong emotional reactions. Secondary appraisal involves evaluating our ability to cope with the situation. When we feel capable of handling challenges, we experience less stress and more positive emotions. Cognitive reappraisal is a powerful emotion regulation strategy based on cognitive theory. By changing how we think about situations, we can change our emotional responses. Viewing a setback as a learning opportunity rather than a failure can transform disappointment into motivation. The cognitive theory helps explain individual differences in emotional responses. People with different beliefs, values, and thinking patterns will have different emotional reactions to the same events. Understanding these cognitive factors is crucial for developing emotional intelligence. Cognitive distortions, identified in cognitive behavioral therapy, demonstrate how flawed thinking patterns can create problematic emotions. Catastrophizing, all-or-nothing thinking, and mind reading can generate unnecessary anxiety, depression, and anger. Learning to identify and correct these distortions improves emotional well-being. The theory also explains cultural differences in emotional experience. Different cultures have different values, beliefs, and interpretive frameworks, leading to different emotional patterns. What triggers shame in one culture might not affect someone from another culture at all. Expectancy effects demonstrate cognitive influences on emotion. When we expect something to be emotionally significant, we often experience stronger emotions than when we're surprised by events. Anticipatory anxiety and excitement are examples of cognition creating emotions before events actually occur. The therapeutic applications of cognitive theory include cognitive behavioral therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy, and mindfulness-based interventions. These approaches help people identify and modify the thought patterns that create problematic emotions, providing tools for long-term emotional regulation and well-being. 10th component, alexithymia. Alexithymia, literally meaning without words for emotions, is a condition characterized by difficulty identifying, describing, and expressing emotions. People with alexithymia often know they feel something but can't name what it is or explain it to others. Understanding alexithymia provides important insights into the challenges some people face with emotional intelligence. The condition affects approximately 10% of the population and can range from mild difficulty with emotional awareness to severe inability to process emotional information. Alexithymia isn't a mental illness, but rather a personality trait that can significantly impact relationships, mental health, and overall life satisfaction. People with alexithymia typically have several characteristic features. They struggle to identify their own emotions, often describing physical sensations instead of feelings. They have difficulty describing emotions to others, frequently using vague terms like upset or fine, regardless of the actual emotional complexity they might be experiencing. Alexithymia also involves limited imagination and fantasy life, with thinking that's very concrete and focused on external events rather than internal experiences. People with this condition often seem emotionally distant or disconnected, not because they don't feel emotions, but because they can't process or express them effectively. The causes of alexithymia are not fully understood, but likely involve both genetic and environmental factors. Some research suggests differences in brain connectivity between emotional and language processing areas. Trauma, cultural factors that discourage emotional expression, and certain neurological conditions can also contribute to alexithymic traits. Alexithymia significantly impacts relationships because emotional sharing and empathy are crucial for close connections. Partners of people with alexithymia often feel frustrated or lonely because their loved one seems emotionally unavailable, even though the person with alexithymia may care deeply but simply can't express it. The condition also affects physical health because people with alexithymia often experience emotions as physical symptoms. They might develop chronic pain, digestive issues, or other somatic problems that are actually manifestations of unprocessed emotional stress. However, alexithymia exists on a spectrum, and many people have some alexithymic traits without meeting criteria for the full condition. Everyone occasionally struggles to identify or express emotions, especially during stressful or overwhelming periods. Treatment approaches for alexithymia focus on developing emotional awareness and expression skills. This might involve emotion-focused therapy, mindfulness training, creative therapies like art or music, and gradual practice with emotional vocabulary and expression. Understanding alexithymia helps explain why emotional intelligence doesn't come naturally to everyone. For people with alexithymic traits, developing emotional intelligence requires extra effort and potentially professional help. It also highlights the importance of emotional education and creating environments where emotional expression is safe and encouraged. The concept of alexithymia also reminds us not to assume that people who seem emotionally distant or unexpressive don't have rich emotional lives. They might be experiencing intense emotions but lack the ability to recognize, process, or communicate them effectively. Conclusion: the journey of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence represents one of the most important skills we can develop in our lifetime. It affects every aspect of our lives: our relationships, our work performance, our mental and physical health, and our overall life satisfaction. Unlike traditional intelligence, emotional intelligence can be learned and improved throughout our lives. The components we've explored today work together synergistically. Self-awareness provides the foundation for self-regulation, which enables authentic motivation. Empathy builds on self-awareness to create understanding of others, which supports effective social skills. Understanding phenomena like emotional contagion, mood effects, and different theories of emotion provides the knowledge base for applying emotional intelligence effectively. Developing emotional intelligence is not about becoming perfect or never experiencing difficult emotions. Instead, it's about becoming more conscious, skillful, and intentional in how we navigate our emotional lives. It's about using emotions as information and allies rather than seeing them as obstacles or enemies. The benefits of emotional intelligence extend far beyond individual well-being. Emotionally intelligent people create more positive environments for others, build stronger relationships, and contribute to healthier families, organizations, and communities. In our increasingly connected and complex world, these skills become more valuable every year. The journey of emotional intelligence is deeply personal. Each person starts from a different place, faces different challenges, and develops skills in their own unique way. Some people are naturally more emotionally aware, while others have to work harder to develop these abilities. Understanding conditions like alexithymia reminds us to be patient and compassionate with ourselves and others in this development process. Technology offers new tools for developing emotional intelligence, from apps that help track emotions to virtual reality experiences that build empathy. However, the core of emotional intelligence remains fundamentally human. It's about understanding ourselves and connecting authentically with others. As you continue developing your emotional intelligence, remember that it's a lifelong journey. There will be setbacks and challenges, moments of confusion and clarity, times when emotions feel overwhelming, and times when they provide perfect guidance. The goal isn't to master emotions completely, but to develop an increasingly wise and skillful relationship with them. The investment you make in emotional intelligence pays dividends not just for yourself, but for everyone whose life you touch. More emotionally intelligent parents raise more emotionally healthy children. More emotionally intelligent leaders create more positive and productive organizations. More emotionally intelligent friends and partners build stronger, more satisfying relationships. In our fast-paced, often impersonal world, emotional intelligence becomes a form of wisdom that helps us stay connected to what matters most: our relationships with ourselves and others. It reminds us that beneath all our differences in background, beliefs, and circumstances, we share the fundamental human experience of having emotions and needing connection. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of emotional intelligence. Remember, every moment offers an opportunity to practice these skills, to become more aware of your emotions and those of others, and to respond with greater wisdom and compassion. The journey of emotional intelligence is not just about becoming more successful. It's about becoming more fully human. Your emotions are not obstacles to overcome but valuable sources of information and connection. By developing your emotional intelligence, you're not just improving your own life. You're contributing to a more emotionally intelligent world where understanding, empathy, and authentic connection can flourish.